in person directly, that if you are, as well as some of the other administration officials, that if you have insurance, obviously you should be able to get tested, is what they say. Medicare and Medicaid will pay for, if you're on Medicare or Medicaid, that should cover the cost of the test. The legislation that we look to be voting on, it's going through negotiations now here in Congress, hopefully later today, also includes that every single test will be free for everyone, no matter who you are or your circumstance.
Okay, well, I'm just it's the headline today in the LA Times saying that Trump administration blocks states from using Medicaid to respond. So that's a headline. I haven't had time to read the story. I just
Yeah,
saw the
I'll
headline.
check it out. Whether the one I know is specific to testing,
Mm-hmm.
there may be other areas that they're referring to, or maybe the wires have been crossed yet again. I think this is part of the problem, is the muddled criteria and guidance and information flow. I think has created a lot of other problems that have stopped us as a country from being able to implement the most basic steps necessary to get people tested so they can protect themselves and their community.
So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I want to jump up and down and scream as loud as I can or do something
Well,
because it's crazy that I watched them ask at the press conference, at what point will people be able to be tested, and they have no answer. So
there
there's
is
not
no
even the minimal response to this is not even happening from the Trump administration. They have zero answers. They can't tell you when there'll be a system in place. They don't even know what kind of system. They can't answer you why. So, but is the Congress now going home for a recess right now?
Yesterday was supposed to be the last day of votes. We are all still here. Both the House and the Senate are here today. We're hoping to be able to get the House Democrats and Republicans are negotiating. They're negotiating, I believe, with the Senate as well as the administration to get a bipartisan direct aid package for individual Americans passed as quickly as possible. The Senate canceled their recess next week to be able to do so. We should stay here for as long as it takes to be able to get this done, to make sure that there's paid sick leave for people who are told you got to go home for at least 14 days, or if you're sick, go home until you're well, and then 14 days after that. We cannot be in a situation where people are concerned if they'll be able to pay the rent, or even have to think about, well, I'm feeling a little bit sick, maybe I have to go to work anyway because I don't know how I'm going to pay the bills. So paid sick leave, plussing up unemployment insurance for those who get laid off or lose their jobs for some reason. But again, I'm really pushing hard for this universal basic payment because it will be the most simple, direct, positive impact for every single American to be able to shore up whatever they need to weather this storm.
So I just can't get over the lack of response. I mean, we knew this was coming. They did nothing. We don't have testing. Cleveland Clinic came up with a new test that is much faster. You can know in 8 hours instead of 4 days. Um, so, okay, so
Big.
you're not in the debate this Sunday. You've been excluded from the debate. Now, this is the exact kind of
big
thing
on
that
it,
you're going to be
bro.
talking about in a way that
Ryan.
Joe Biden and Bernie isn't going to be
Okay.
talking about. Especially connecting our foreign policy to our domestic policy. How frustrating is that for you? And what do you think voters should do?
Voters are the ones who lose out in this, Jimmy, because there'll be this debate there on Sunday. I guarantee, based on past track record, you're not going to hear a lot about foreign policy. And I think even related to the coronavirus, if it's brought up, it will be kind of the cursory talking points that we've heard a lot of, rather than the very real practical ramifications of both what's being done right, but also what's being done wrong, and therefore how we fix it. If we have leaders who are not able to connect these dots and recognize and drive home the point, foreign policy is inseparable from domestic policy, and the moderators clearly are not pushing this point forward, then again, it is the American voters who lose in this process because they don't have the information that they need to be best equipped to make this very, very serious decision.
And you're the only one speaking
Haven't-
clearly
wait,
about
what?
the election interference that's coming from our intelligence community and from our media, right? No one else will say that. In fact, the both people on the debate stage on Sunday are going to prop up that bogus narrative, which is another reason why I'm glad you're staying in the race because you're, and you gave me a chance to vote for you in my conscience. And I just want people to know I'm a donor to Tulsi Sue, so just so everybody knows. And that's not going to happen on this Sunday. They're not going to talk about the actual meddling in our elections. They're not going to talk about the way you're talking about coronavirus and what's. So why do you think you're being excluded?
I think there's probably a number of reasons, but when you challenge the power with the truth, and the power includes the powerful politicians, the powerful parties, the powerful media, the elite here in Washington, they don't like it much. And we've seen that from day one of our campaign, where they have tried to either completely black out or silence my candidacy, the message that I'm bringing to the American people, or have tried to smear and undermine me in order to foment suspicion or doubt or fear in people's minds. When you threaten the very foundation of their power with the truth, and people being empowered themselves and knowing the truth and therefore being able to make decisions accordingly, we see the kinds of tactics that they've chosen to use.
Now, we know that the Sanders campaign was in close coordination with the Hillary Clinton campaign prior to the convention in 2016, to the point where the Hillary Clinton campaign was using Bernie's email list to send out messages directly from Robbie Mook to his delegates. So they're not above working with the opposition. I want to know, have they reached out to you during this primary campaign to have some kind of coordinated progressive kind of strategy or any kind of thing? Because he doesn't even seem to mention you.
No.
Joe Biden's his good friend, but you're the one who nominated him in 2016, and he doesn't seem to remember you're running.
No.
Oh, okay. All right, that's too bad. You would think that would, their ground game is really horrible. I don't know if, okay. Tulsi, thank you so much for taking time, and thanks for having a clear plan to address this. That's a great idea. I hope that the other two candidates join on to your UBI idea. I hope that the news media pushes it, and I hope that they elevate your voice now, because again, you're the real leader. You're showing real leadership at every turn, and you have strength, which is what people like. And you're a truth teller, and you're not bought. And so I just want to say thanks for your leadership during this coronavirus outbreak.
Thank you, Jimmy. And thanks for continuing to bring your voice out and helping people be better informed about what's really going on.
Okay. Take care. Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
All right. So that was Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, and presidential candidate with real solutions to these problems. So we'll see what happens. And, she speaks really clearly, always. about everything. Everybody, the next live Jimmy Dore show is May 1st in Minneapolis, and then we're going to Chicago. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for all the tickets to all our live shows, and become a premium member at jimmydorecomedy.com/join. We give you hours of bonus material every week. Thanks for your support.
Yeah.
Hello.
Also concentrating on video editing, and so I spent about 10 hours this week editing about an hour discussion with a Russian Orthodox icon carver, weirdly enough, that I'm going to launch in the next 3 or 4 days. And we discussed things that are very image heavy, and so I've been cutting in a lot of images, and it is a technology that far supersedes what, I like lecturing, and lectures can be very effective, but basically with YouTube, you can turn your lecture into a documentary. And then instead of teaching 100 people, you can teach 50,000. It's like, that's a lot different. That's a lot different. And then it's up there permanently.
Yes, and that 50,000 can grow and grow and grow. And as it becomes more spread and shared, also the discussions about it become more varied.
Yeah. Well, more than 3 million people have watched some element of this in the last couple of months. And in September, I had about 9,000 subscribers. That took me about 3 years to build. And one of my ambitions, which was kind of a tongue-in-cheek and comical ambition, is I thought, I bet I can get more subscribers in the next 3 years than the U of T has students. And I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. It's like all of a sudden I could have a body of students, let's say, that's larger than the entire university. It's like, what? Well, just exactly what the hell does that mean? And the answer to that is, I don't know what that means. Who knows what that means? But one of the other perverse things that happened while I was being warned and cautioned by the university was that my subscriber base grew from 9,000 to 65,000. So now I have more YouTube subscribers than the University of Toronto has students. It's like, so then I think, well, hell, you know, I could do a whole series on Solzhenitsyn. I could do a whole series on George Orwell. I could do a whole series on Aldous Huxley. I could do a whole series on archetypal biblical stories. And half of me thinks, well, if 50,000 people are going to watch each of those, and I can turn them into documentaries instead of just lectures, maybe that's what I should be doing. Like, I couldn't write a book with that much reach. That's crazy reach.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's revolutionary. I believe that. I believe it's revolutionary.
I believe it is too, and I believe no one saw it coming. And I think it's such a new thing that we're all just sort of starting to get a handle on how to use it and what it's capable of.
Yes, well, it was like the internet was for pornography. Well, that changed quick. And YouTube was for cute cat videos. And that changed quick too. You don't know what the technology is going to do.
Well, it's also, I don't know how much you've paid attention to virtual reality or how much you've experimented with it, but my good friend Duncan Trussell has one of those HTC Vives, and I put it on over his house. He runs a podcast, and we played with it for about an hour and a half, and then we did a podcast, and I'm thoroughly convinced, especially now, with new phones. There's a phone that I just got called the Google Pixel, and it comes, you can buy it with this headset. You slide the phone into the headset, you put on this virtual reality program, and you're watching a virtual reality show on your phone. I mean, a regular phone that fits in your pocket just slides into this headset. You could do not just a two-dimensional thing where you're showing a lecture and showing images and having a discussion and putting these images in the background or in the foreground and have the audio over it, but rather you could have three-dimensional things where you could show a city, a village, a mountain range. You could show geometric patterns. You could get involved in, I mean, it could be used for a million different things, and not just for entertainment, but also for education. And I think that's the next step, I think. I mean, it's an unbelievably fascinating new
Well, you must be
world.
shocked to some degree at how popular your podcasts have become. I mean, you have, I don't know how many people on YouTube have a larger subscriber base than you, but it's not that many. So, I mean, how do you account for that? And does that surprise you?
It's surprising, but this whole podcast thing is very surprising. But it's the YouTube is only a small fraction of the amount of people that actually listen to the podcast.
Right.
The numbers, the downloads are insane. Jamie, what was last month's numbers? What was the
YouTube was around 12 million for the month, and audio is at 60 million.
Whoa!
Wow. Yeah, and I
That's for
haven't
a
done,
month.
like, I haven't played anywhere near enough with turning my online lectures into podcasts
You
either.
definitely should. You
Yeah.
definitely should. It's, I mean, a lot of it you could listen to when you're in a car.
Right, or when you're
You know?
exercising or that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I know. You're
Because-
not glued to a screen with the podcasts.
No, I was doing some work around my office when I was listening to one of yours, one of your things on YouTube, and I found that it was just as interesting if I was doing some other things around my office. Like
Yeah.
it's a very good passive, like podcasts themselves are a very good passive form of education.
Yes, absolutely. Well,
entertainment.
and that makes them different than reading.
Yeah.
You know, because reading is faster if you're a good reader, but you
Right.
can't do anything else while you're doing it.
Right.
But people are much more naturally attuned to listening than they are to reading.
Yeah.
Because we've only been reading, really, human beings have only been reading, roughly speaking, in any large numbers for 500 years.
Right.
Right? It's a blink of the eye. Whereas we've been listening for a very, very long period of time. And all this new technology, like, puts us right back. It puts us back into tribal mode, basically, except with this incredible technological enhancement.
It wouldn't be difficult at all to extract the audio from any of these YouTube videos and just start putting it online as a podcast. And again, you know, people could listen to it when they're in traffic, when
Yep.
they can't look at
Yep,
anything,
yep.
on planes, on the bus, you know, wherever you are, where you can just sit down and you can close your eyes and you don't have to be paying attention to it visually.
Yeah, well, about 4 or 5 months ago, I emailed the University of Toronto, because they have a kind of a massive online course branch, which they're toying with. And I said, look, I've got 1 million people who've watched my videos. Like, maybe you guys should give me a hand. We should do something about this because I got 1 million people who are watching these videos. It's like, that's a significant number of people. It's worth attending to, but perhaps I contacted the wrong people, but I never did get a response. But it's something I'm doing it actively right now, and I think the quality of my videos has improved substantially in the last month. And I really like doing video editing, although it's very painstaking. But it's definitely, the universities better be careful because they're dumping their content online as fast as they can. They're going to make themselves completely superfluous. And some smart person, I've been thinking about this for 20 years, is going to take over the accreditation end. Because, you know, all you'd have to do is set up a series of well-designed examinations online and only let a minority of people pass. You have instant accreditation credibility. It's like, here's an entire 3 years worth of psychology courses. Here's the exams. You take them. Only 15% of the people pass.
Why only 15%? Why would you limit the number?
Because it makes the accreditation valuable.
But you would limit the number based on what if you had a much larger group than 15% that were effectively absorbing the information?
Well, fair enough. You'd have to toy with the accreditation mechanisms. But I mean, part of the utility in accreditation is that it's inequality. If everyone gets accredited, then the accreditation is worth
but
nothing.
wouldn't you just make it difficult?
Yeah, well, that's what you do, is make it difficult.
Yeah, but
it's
I mean,
just
instead
a
of
proxy
limiting
for difficulty.
Right, okay. So you wouldn't necessarily be limiting the number, you would just make it so difficult that the number would be limited almost naturally.
That's right. Well, I think I'd probably make it, yes, that's exactly right. I wouldn't limit the number of times people could take the exams.
That's a great idea as well.
So as long as you hit threshold, I mean, that's what happens often, say, with like if you're trying to pass the bar or something like that. You get to take it a number of times, but you have to hit threshold.
Well, Thaddeus Russell, who's a history professor at Occidental, he's doing that very same thing. He talked about it here, that he's building right now an online university. And he is planning on giving out degrees in history through his online university because he's been teaching at universities for a long time, and he has a huge problem also with the politically correct movement. And he was speaking out against this really crazy story where these two kids, adults, got intoxicated and had sex, and because they were both intoxicated, for some reason the boy was described as the attacker and he was being accused of sexual assault, even though it was consensual, completely consensual, even though they were both. Not only did she send him text saying, do you have condoms, come on over, we're going to do this, but because they were intoxicated, he was the one that was the rapist, which is insane. It's sexist. It's 100% sexist. That kid is suing, and Thaddeus Russell came on here and discussed it, but that politically correct ideology where, I mean, it's essentially, it's prejudice against men in that particular, the idea that
So he's stepping outside of the university.
Yeah, he's slowly moving. I mean,
Gad Saad is doing that at Concordia too.
Yes.
And he gets 100,000 people watching each video.
Yeah, he's been on here a few
power.
times.
Yeah,
I love that guy. And again, he's another one who, like yourself, has stuck his neck out and spoke out about what he thinks is this preposterous movement towards denying facts, denying reality, and forming these narratives that are based on their ideologies, and sticking within this box, and then seeking to find people that agree with it, and then reinforcing these ideas in this echo chamber. And it's just, for someone who's outside of it, like myself, it's a fascinating thing to watch. For someone who's inside of it, like yourself, it must be mad.
Well, we've tried other online interventions too. So I have these YouTube videos up, but we also I worked with some corporations a while back because I've done some consulting, and I designed tests to help people hire better employees, which I still do. And in fact, I work with this company up in California called the Founder Institute, and it's the world's largest stage early technology company incubator. It's created 2,500 companies in the last 4 years, and we test now in 135 cities. But when I was marketing these tests to companies, they kept asking me what could be done about their poorer performing employees. And I said, well, I didn't know, because It's not that easy to, if you have someone who's problematic, who's troubled, it's not that easy for a manager to figure out how to straighten them out. And they just don't have the time. They don't have the time, they don't have the manpower, and they don't have the training usually to do that. But I designed this set of programs called the Self-Authoring Suite. And one of them, the Future Authoring Program, helps people write out a plan for their life. So it helps them, it asks you some questions about 6 dimensions of your life. You know, your health, mental and physical, your use of drugs and alcohol, your wishes 3 to 5 years down the road for intimate relationships, for family, for career, for education, and so on. It asks you, what could your life be like 3 to 5 years down the road if you set it up for you like you were someone you were taking care of? So it asks you those 6 questions. Then it asks you to write for 15 minutes about your vision for your life. You get to have what you want and what would be good for you. What would that be? And then it asks you to write for 15 minutes about what your life would be like 3 to 5 years down the road if you let your bad habits and your, you know, idiocies and your foolishnesses and your weaknesses take the upper hand and auger you into the ground. Because everyone knows about that. And so it's like you get to design a little heaven to strive for and a little hell to avoid. And then you write for, then you basically turn that into an implementable plan. That's the second part of the program. We've used that with about 5 to 7,000 university students now, mostly in Europe at the Rotterdam School of Management. And we've raised their grade point average of their kids 25%, dropped their dropout rate the same. And it's had a walloping effect on men and on non-Western ethnic minorities. It's moved the non-Western ethnic minority student population performance at Rotterdam School of Management from 70% below the average to above the female Dutch natives. And so the reason I'm telling you this, apart from the fact that it's a very good program, and we did it at Mohawk College in Canada a year ago. We dropped their dropout rate in the first semester 50%, and that especially again worked well for men because men are at more risk of dropping out now, and especially for men who didn't have good grades in high school. So not only is there the possibility for the net to provide tremendous dissemination of intellectual material, but there's also the possibility for the net to provide dissemination of psychological interventions that have major impacts on people's mental health and productivity at extraordinarily low cost. So that's really been fun too. So,
well, I think providing that sort of a structure and a framework, giving people the tools just in form of asking them questions. What would you like to do?
Yeah.
Please describe this. What is your and when you do that, you sort of allow them to help themselves outline what they would like to accomplish, which most people don't do.
No, well, in our education system was designed in Chicago in the late 1800s to produce factory workers, because it was set up when rural people were migrating to the cities en masse because their kids, first of all, were likely to get factory jobs, and second of all, if you were working in a factory, your kids needed to be taken care of. And so the purpose of the schools was to train factory workers, which is why everyone's lined up in rows, and why there are bells. It's a factory model. The problem with that is that now people's careers basically have to be self-determined, but that's never part of the education system. Part of the reason I developed these programs was because I realized this is the same course where I'm teaching students that if they would have been in Germany in the 1930s, they would have been Nazis. I'm trying to get them to design their lives, and it's way better to have someone articulate their own plan. You actually neurologically rewire people by having them formulate their own thoughts, which is why, you know, your school teachers used to say, put it in your own words. It's actually very good advice if they would explain what that means. It's like, if you have to conjure up the thoughts and you have to articulate them, then they change you. And so this program has had the effects have been absolutely overwhelming for us as researchers, because it's very, very difficult to produce an intervention that actually has a positive effect on people. You know, you hope it does, but generally when you test it out, it's like, nah, it doesn't do what you thought it did, or sometimes it even has the reverse effect.
That sounds fascinating. Now, how do people how can a regular person have access to this?
Yeah, it's called self-authoring. So that's SELF authoring, like writing a book, selfauthoring.com. And the programs, I gave away the Future Authoring program. I think it might still be free. It is till the end of November. I did a video called Message to Millennials, because one of the things Jonathan Haidt said about, he called Karl Marx, the patron saint of the social justice warriors, and John Stuart Mill, the patron saint of people, say, who stood for objective truth and freedom of expression. And I thought that was really smart. He said Brown University is #1 for social justice warrior universities, in Chicago for truth universities. But one of the things that Marx has over John Stuart Mill is that Marx is a social revolutionary, and young people like to think about ways to change the world, right? And that's actually a positive part of their development. It's a stage that the developmental psychologist Jean Piaget called the messianic stage, and he associated that with late adolescence. It's like, well, young people want to change the world. The problem is that that's been harnessed into attempts to change other people. But that isn't what you should do. If you want to change the world, you should change yourself. And I don't mean that in some cliched sense. I mean it in the sense that Alexander Solzhenitsyn said when he analyzed the Soviet Union. He said, don't be thinking that the line that divides good from evil runs down a political spectrum or countries or something like that. It runs down right down the middle of your soul. And if you want to sort out the world, then what you do is you sort yourself out. It's a serious business, right? They say it's more difficult to rule yourself than to rule a city. And that's the truth, because you're complicated and there are horrible monsters inside of you that need to be tamed and to be brought into alignment and submission so that you can be a powerful and useful person. And I gave away the Future Authoring Program as part of this video I made, suggesting to millennials that instead of rushing out there to change the world by changing other bad people, that they should look inward and sort themselves out properly. And I think we've given away about 4,000 or 5,000 of those programs so far.
Now,
I'm
you said
thrilled
it's
about that.
free till the end of November, and
Yeah.
then what happens with it?
Well, the Future Authoring Program is regularly $14.95, and the whole self-authoring suite, which involves, it's a program that helps you write an autobiography, so it helps you sort out things about your past that are still burdening you. You can tell, if you have a memory that's more than 18 months old, approximately, and when you pull that memory up to mind, if you still have an emotional reaction, that means you haven't fully articulated the memory. You haven't analyzed it causally. You haven't freed yourself from its grasp, and you're carrying it like a weight. And your brain responds to that. Like the more weight you're carrying like that, more baggage, let's say, the more of the stress hormone cortisol your brain produces, and cortisol makes you old. Some of this work has been done by James Pennebaker at the University of Texas at Austin, because he started to pioneer these sorts of writing programs, and he found that if people wrote about uncertain things, past, present, or future, so they could be traumatic things, they could be uncertain things, that their physical health improved. And he did a lot of detailed research trying to figure out why that was, and basically came down to the explanation that it was something like an uncertainty reduction mechanism at work. Because your brain is always figuring out how well situated are you in the world. How much do you not know compared to how much have...
I believe that Joe Biden will be the Democratic nominee, and I've always said I'm going to support whoever the nominee is, so I hereby am endorsing Joe Biden to be not just the nominee for the Democratic Party, but the next president of the United States. And I say this, having supported Bernie Sanders in 2016, Bernie was an inspiration for me, inspired my run, but the math says Joe is our prohibitive nominee. We need to bring the party together. We need to start working on defeating Donald Trump.
Interesting to see that.
Indeed, Andrew Yang making some big news last night. What did you make of it?
I thought that I was a little surprised because I didn't think he would so quickly endorse. I thought he would pull more like a Liz Warren in 2016 and wait until everything was officially decided.
Liz Warren in 2020
Liz
as
Warren
well.
in 2020
It's
as
just
well.
a Liz Warren.
I mean, he is right. The math is prohibitively on Joe Biden's side. I just think it's fascinating to me because it goes a little bit against so much of the ethos of his campaign, which was you can't just focus on beating Trump. You got to understand why Trump was elected. He more than I think most people on that stage, looked at the beating heart of what it was about workers and about why they decided to vote for Trump in 2016, the opioid crisis. I mean, he talked about America in a way that's as close to as I think like our worldview as anybody else, and that's just so antithesis to the antithesis of Biden. At the same time, I mean, I just never painted Andrew Yang as a party loyalist, especially when 41% of his voters said
Voted for Trump.
that they would vote for Trump and said they wouldn't back anybody else in the Democratic contest. I got so many messages from Yang Gang people saying why I'm going to vote for Trump in the general election now that Yang is not there, because nobody else understands me and why I decided to vote Trump in the first place, or what's going on in my life. So I was surprised by it, but perhaps it's a political move for him.
Well, and that's the thing is like he's not supposed to be that kind of calculated political actor. I mean, you listen to that Andrew Yang, it doesn't sound anything like the guy that we heard up on the debate stage who explained, who was one of the most courageous people in saying basically like impeachment is a sideshow.
Yeah.
Right. This is not good for us.
Good on that.
Right.
And he called out Joe on Hunter Biden, saying I would never
was one of the only
have
people to do it.
He was the only person
And
who would say that.
so to watch him, look, I kind of was fine with him not endorsing anyone. You know, to me, the candidate that made the most sense was Bernie Sanders. But to your point, a lot of his voters are not regular Democratic voters. They may vote for Trump. Like, I kind of got him just saying, okay, you guys figure it out. But to wait and see which candidate is winning and then throw him behind him, it's just like such a typical political move, which I didn't expect to come from him.
I didn't expect it either. I do think, again, I would like to hear him talk about, and this is what I really hope. I hope it doesn't change his authenticity. I hope it doesn't change him still being able to critique Joe Biden and the Democratic establishment.
But you hear him, he said we got to unite behind the nominee. I mean, it could have been like a near tandem up there.
I know, and that was the strange part. It's just language just doesn't seem natural and coming from Andrew Yang. And like I said, I hope he uses his platform on CNN right now to talk about the very issues which drove him to run, which he correctly identified in the country, and which Joe Biden straight up does not get.
Well, worse than does not get. Was a major part of creating those problems. I know Andrew focused more on automation than trade, but that was a part of his argument as well, that, that trade was significant. I mean, Joe Biden helped architect that strategy, stands by it to this day, and we haven't heard any remorse about any of that. I mean, he still believes in TPP, still believes in NAFTA and that NAFTA created more jobs than lost, hasn't laid out any kind of a vision to deal with the voters and have respect for the voters that Andrew Yang really spoke to. Remember when they got asked that stupid question on the debate stage about their like surprise friendship, and Andrew, which wasn't surprising to us, was like, I have this friend who's a trucker who's like changed his mind about the way he thinks about politics. New York Times is so shocked by that, they had to track him down. They did a whole piece. Oh, it turns out it's true. Well, yeah, because Andrew actually treated those voters with respect, like listened to their concerns, heard them, saw them, dignity, exactly, like human beings. I mean, that was his whole thing, humanity first, right? And compare that to Joe Biden's interaction with this union worker who wanted to ask him about his stance on guns. He loses it. He sneers at him, challenges him, calls him, says he's a horse's ass, says he's lying, et cetera, et cetera. Could not be two more different approaches to, these same types of people who have similar concerns.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, it makes sense in one way, and I just hope that he continues to espouse the things that he did in the campaign trail, very correctly identifying what's wrong in this country.
A voice like his is so needed in the mainstream. I was so excited to see him on CNN, and I just hope that he uses that platform to elevate the ideas and the central critique, not only of Donald Trump or of the past, but also of Joe Biden and the Democrats and what they're doing today.
Certainly.
All right, we're going to have more for you after this.
Didn't even get a slap on the wrist. It was nothing. Why? Again, because we're so intertwined with them with business relations, and he is making money from them. And
where is that right now? Like,
where's what? The Jamal Khashoggi thing?
Yes.
As far as I know, it's dead in the water.
That's crazy.
But this, again, look at the difference between how they talk about stuff like this when it's a U.S. ally versus when it's not a U.S. ally. When it's a U.S. ally like Saudi Arabia that does it, there's nothing to see here. But if you get a similar story coming out of Iran, for example, who's not a U.S. ally, or they love to go after Maduro, and I'm not saying he's a good guy, but they go after Maduro because he's not a U.S. ally. So they could harp away on all the negative things about him, but we're not having a conversation about Jamal Khashoggi. We're not having a conversation about people being beheaded in the public square for stuff like sorcery, Joe. They kill people in Saudi Arabia for sorcery and witchcraft and drug smuggling and apostasy. If you don't think God is real and you say that in Saudi Arabia, they could kill you. They could cut your head off in the public square.
And Are they really killing people for sorcery?
Yes.
Really?
Yes. They're killing people for sorcery. It's crazy.
The Khashoggi thing is super disturbing because it seems like everybody's like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
I know.
I mean, it would have been cleaner if they just made him have some sort of heart attack or an accident or something along those lines.
If there was plausible deniability in any way.
The way they did it, it's almost like this guy wanted them to do it a certain way. He wanted them to chop this guy up and put him in bags and deliver him out of the country in suitcases and shit, or whatever the fuck they did, however they got rid of him. It's such a disturbing decision that they made.
Yeah. And they know they're going to get away with it. And again, this is what happens.
Right? It's been over a year.
They have. They absolutely have.
When was the murder? How long ago?
Last time I was on the podcast, we spoke about it. And last time I was on the podcast was a year ago. So it was over a year ago.
Okay.
And it's just whatever.
Not doing it.
Again, if they're our ally, that means, they really do. There's so much business that goes on between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia and the weapons deals and everything that the argument, Trump actually made this argument in the White House sitting next to, the Saudi crown prince. He's like, they're buying so many weapons. It's so tremendous, the weapons they're buying. And he holds up like the pictures of this from Raytheon. This is what he's getting. This is from Boeing. This is what he's getting. And it's like, oh my God, imagine for a second it's anybody. Like, imagine it was a deal like that with Kim Jong-un. He's like, we're selling Kim Jong-un these tremendous